this is very interesting when we look at correspondences. So this I already read to you, so I won't read it again, but what's interesting here is the part about the red lights on the earth. Now, when I saw those little red lights on the earth in my lucid dream, I was imagining that those were the people participating online, because the red lights were spread out around the globe a little bit. So it's an international association, and some of the people couldn't make it in person, and they were playing the contest online. Now, Dale Graff, who some of you may know or have heard of, but he is the former director of Project Stargate. He participated in the contest, and he described in his dream a board game where buttons were pressed that left a red dot or red circle on the button. His drawing displays some buttons with red lights. That was an interesting correspondence, and Dale was very moved by that. He was telling me about that. Now, in my dreams, remember I said an IASD member and I improvised martial arts moves. So Kira Sass, who was at the conference, says she pictured my face, but then had a visual of me fighting and lunging, and that I seemed to display some kind of sword play like a samurai. Later, I recorded, I ask everyone to drive their rockets back to Earth. This whole part about a gardening project on an IASD plot of land. Gina Sestak titled her dream Broadcast Planting and wrote that Angel is throwing or strewing something, seeds or stars, from her right hand. Now, something that Bob said, happens every year at these contests, there are always displacement hits. Very interesting ones. So this was not the target. This is one of the decoy images here. Picture number 1 at the Lotus Temple in Yogaville, Virginia. And this entry here was entitled Pink Flower, and it looks kind of a lot like the lotus. And here's another displacement from picture number 2. Again, a decoy, not the target. And here's an example of a dream entry with 13 flags hanging. All right, so the following year, Bob asked me to come back and be the sender again. And what was different this time, they decided to use a multi-sensory approach. Okay, so at Maimonedes, one of the things they did, for example, and they may have already told you about this, so I'll remind you. For example, there was one of the targets was Christ on the cross. So they had the sender take a little wooden cross and a cutout of Christ and a marker and some thumbtacks. And they said, your task is to tack Christ onto the cross and then use the red marker to draw the blood. So that activity yielded some very good hits. So Bob and Bobby decided to put together a multi-sensory package. So there were actually 4, only 3 revealed, but they created 4 different potential targets on different themes. And Bob wanted to see, what Bob did is he hid one of them. Okay, so when they presented the contest that night, they said there were only 3, but there were actually 4. And that was, he wanted to test to see if people would still displace on the dummy, the one he had hidden. But this was the target that I selected that night. And so in the package, there were these 4 images, ants, bee, tarantula, zebra bugs, and these little plastic toys. And they were in color, but these are black and white images here, but they were in color. And then there was a disc, a CD for me to listen to with sounds of bugs, crickets and bees and all kinds of insects. So that night, I laid out these images and I held the little toy plastic bugs, but I decided that I really didn't like the word bugs, and I didn't really want to dream as a lucid dreamer. I didn't want to dream about something bugging me so much. So I decided to shift my intentionality and think about the bugs as insects and honor them as insects. So that was how I incubated my sending and my my dreaming that night. So I'm going to read to you these dreams that I had when I was sending that night. So, and I won't read all of them because this time I actually had 12 short dreams. So I'll just read about what I did before. So the first one, we're all gathered in a clearing by a forest discussing everything that is bugging us. Someone brings up the spill in the Gulf. By the way, this is 2010. And I mention it is irritating, the feeling of almost connecting with people. It feels unnatural and compartmentalized. Why aren't we more integrated with nature? I asked the IASD dreamers. We all look concerned. One IASD member penetrates me with her eyes, wanting to study me. 2. We all sit in a circle on the grass holding hands. The insects from the photos are alive in the center of the circle, crawling around for everyone to see. I thank them for participating and offer them my respect. Some fireflies buzz overhead to give light to the target theme. Since it is dark and night, everyone can see. 3. IASD member is a bee flying over us. It's his head on a bee body. Another IASD member plays his flute and drum and thanks the sacred insect ancestors. 4. There are torches lit and music playing, the celebration of life. The party is in the forest. People dance and run around. Some make love. 5. Some of us turn into insects, then back into human form. I focus in on the band, and the musicians are insects. 1 on a fiddle, 1 on a harp, a banjo, percussion, guitars. Giant black beetles and cockroaches, even an ant and a bee are in the band. I crack up laughing because they are delightful. 6. One of the bug band members gets onto the mic and says, "This one goes out to all our oyster friends in the Gulf of Mexico." Then he asks everyone to say a prayer for all life in the Gulf. We all pray together. 7. The IASD women dance in a circle and paint their totem insect onto the front of their bodies. 8. Human-sized insects protest with chants and signs. Bugs, not thugs. Peaceful insects unite. We won't bite. And bugs, there's a bugs and human treaty, etc. I get on a bullhorn and announce, in case any of you missed it, the theme tonight is bugs. Everyone laughs because they already know. They're covered in paint totems. We sit by a fire and share stories. I like these people. Okay, and then I'm going to skip the next 2 because they were mostly just personal insights. And then at the end, many individual bursts of communication went through my body, and I felt the West Coast dreamers asking me, "What's the theme?" Each time I tell them, "It's bugs," and make bug sounds. I don't remember what bug sounds I made, but I made bug sounds. Ants are all over the kitchen floor in my old house in Ashland, the purple house. So again, this last dream takes me back to earth in a more personal, grounded way. And I should note that both times, all times that I've ever been a sender, you're absolutely, in my experience, exhausted. I was exhausted the next day. It takes a lot of energy to weave back and forth between the sending, the lucid dreaming, the scribbling, and repeat. So the next morning, the dreams were collected. And then after all the dreams were collected, 4 boxes were displayed, including the dummy. Nobody asked, "Oh, I thought there were only 3. They just saw the 4 boxes. And the results were, again, very, very interesting. Our winner was Kathy Evans, who not only wrote down the theme as insect before she saw the choices, she also wrote, "I entered a wooded area, large trees with lots of open space, older forest." Her reporting of an insect theme of forest and clearing directly reflected my dream imagery. Second place went to Yossi Dotan, who, in response to the item, describe any sounds or music you hear on the entry form, answered wind in tree leaves, and reported that he asked me in the dream what the target was, and that I had said, it's dogs. And Bob wanted to attribute that misunderstanding to differing accents because saying over the wind in the tree leaves. So I reported also earlier that when people were asking me what the theme was, how I had said, it's bugs. So Bob's theory is that Yossi heard it's dogs. So this is just a little chart from Dreamtime magazine that was published after this particular contest, showing correspondences between some of my dreams and the dreamer's dreams. So the forest and trees were all gathered in a clearing, and there were 9 dreamers that mentioned either forest or trees. Moving lights, fire, and torches, and the fireflies, flies, insects moving about, lighting all around the flowers. The trees begin to light up, tiny points, tree on fire. Transitioning, changing, and morphing. So there was that one member with his head on the body of a giant bee, and us turning into insects and back into human form, and the band were human-sized insects. That was very interesting. And we have these other dreamers dreaming about transitioning and changing and morphing. Not uncommon to happen in dreams, but still interesting. And then spider web and tarantula on body. One of the insights that I had in my lucid dream that I didn't read before was that tarantula is probably my totem insect, because this one woman had a tarantula painted on her. And when I was 4 years old, around the same time that my father introduced dream work to me, I had an experience in the desert in Colorado where a tarantula climbed up my leg and it went all the way up to my neck. And I was really scared, but I pretended I was a tree. And the tarantula went down and crawled down and then went away. And I felt really empowered that I just got through that, I guess. So that was interesting.